The sentence of betrayal. The bell tolled at dawn, its iron voice cutting through the mist that lingered over the courtyard stones. Villagers gathered in uneasy silence, cloaks pulled tight, breath clouding in the bitter air. Their eyes, wary and watchful, turned toward the raised platform where the gallows waited, a crude structure of wood and rope, hungry for its victim. Elena Marlowe stood among guards, wrists bound, hair tangled from sleepless nights. Once the jewel of noble courts, draped in silk and laughter, she now wore only a coarse prison gown, its threads frayed and clinging to her skin. The crowd whispered her name with awe and disdain, as if speaking it might conjure scandal itself. Her crime had been pronounced treason against the crown, but no one truly believed it. The king's decree carried weight, yet the murmurs in the marketplace told another tale, that the wife of Lord Elena Marlowe had strayed where no woman of her station should. That treason was not against throne or kingdom, but against a husband's pride. From the platform's edge, Renard watched with lips pressed into a rigid line. His dark eyes were unreadable, but the set of his jaw betrayed iron restraint. He had not fought to spare her, nor spoken on her behalf. To plead for her would mean confessing his own humiliation, and his honor was worth more than his wife's life. Beyond the crowd, armored knights stood in formation, silver crests glinting weakly in the gray light. Among them, Sir Aldric Veynar kept his helm lowered, though his gaze never strayed far from Elena. Each clang of the bell reverberated in his chest, a reminder of vows he could not keep. He had sworn loyalty to king and realm, yet his heart had betrayed him long before hers had been accused. They had stolen no more than moments, brief touches in candlelit corridors, words whispered where walls could not listen. But moments, once discovered, became enough to damn them both. The herald stepped forward, parchment unfurled in his hand. His voice rang across the courtyard, sharp against the hush. By decree of His Majesty King Selim, Elena Marlowe is sentenced to hang at first light on the morrow for crimes of treachery and betrayal against the crown. The king himself did not appear. He remained within the cold stone walls of his hall, content to let others carry out his justice. To Selim, Elena was nothing more than an example, a lesson carved in rope and blood. The crowd stirred, shifting uneasily. Some pitied her, others hungered for spectacle. To them, it mattered little whether she had plotted against her husband or her sovereign. Guilt had already been sewn into her name. Elena lifted her chin, though her throat ached with dryness. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. Yet within her chest, her heart beat so violently it seemed it might crack her ribs. Her eyes, searching the sea of faces, found Aldric. For only a heartbeat, his gaze locked with hers, hidden though he was behind his visor. She saw no condemnation there, no judgment, only the silent weight of a man torn in two. It was enough to steady her trembling hands. Renard turned, cloak sweeping across the platform. He did not linger. His presence was a duty fulfilled, nothing more. To remain would suggest weakness, and he was determined to let her hang as a warning, not a wife. The guards led her back toward the dungeon, iron keys clattering as the door swallowed her once more. Darkness greeted her, damp walls and the smell of straw thick in the air. There alone, she allowed her strength to falter. She pressed her forehead to the cold stone and let the silence echo. She had chosen a dangerous love, one that had given her fleeting joy and eternal ruin. Yet even now, awaiting death, she could not summon regret. Above ground, Aldric lingered as the courtyard emptied. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, knuckles pale against steel. He had watched men die in war, had cut through armies at the king's command, but none of it had left him so helpless as this sentence. When the last villager had departed and only the crows remained, the knight turned toward the stables. There, tethered in shadows, his horse stamped its hooves restlessly, as though it, too, sensed the weight of dawn's promise. Aldric exhaled, long and slow, as though forcing his resolve into the cold air. By sunrise, Elena Marlowe would hang from the gallows. unless he defied everything he had ever sworn to protect. The bell tolled once more, echoing like a question he could not yet answer. The hidden truth. Night draped itself over the fortress like a burial shroud. The courtyard emptied of voices, leaving only the caw of restless crows and the groan of wooden beams swaying in the wind. In her cell, Elena sat on the straw-strewn floor, chains heavy against her ankles. Each rattle was a reminder of the rope that waited above her, already measured for her neck. She pressed her palms together, not in prayer, but to still the trembling that coursed through her body. For hours she had forced her face into a mask of defiance, yet now, stripped of the crowd's gaze, she allowed her mind to unravel. She thought of her husband's silence, of how Lord Renard had stood upon the platform as though he were carved from the same stone as the castle walls. Not once had his eyes softened. Not once had he remembered she was flesh, not simply name and duty. But Aldric, oh, Aldric. His gaze had been a quiet storm beneath the visor, wordless yet burning. She remembered the first time she had seen him without armor, the firelight gilding the scar along his cheek, the way his eyes softened only when he looked at her. He had been the king's loyal sword, but with her he had become something else, a man who breathed not for oaths but for her smile. The scrape of boots stirred the silence. She lifted her head. The dungeon door opened just wide enough for a shaft of torchlight to pierce the gloom. A guard slipped in, set down a wooden cup and a crust of bread, then retreated without a word. When the door closed again, she saw it, an extra cloak folded neatly beneath the tray. Her breath caught. The guards had never shown kindness. This was no accident. She touched the coarse wool, fingers trembling as though the fabric itself carried a hidden message. He was watching. He was near. Above her cell, Aldric leaned against the cold stone wall of the corridor, helm tucked beneath his arm. His chest rose with quiet restraint. Leaving the cloak had been a risk, but he could not bear the thought of her shivering in the damp chill. That small comfort was all he could offer without betraying himself. He remembered the words they had never dared speak aloud. If discovered, we are nothing but ash. Yet here she was, awaiting the king's rope, and he could not remain idle while the dawn crept closer. Through narrow slits in the cell wall, moonlight fell upon Elena's face. She lifted her eyes to it, and in that silver glow she seemed both fragile and unbreakable. Aldric knew that no decree of kings, no gallows, could erase what he felt for her. He had fought for crowns and banners all his life, yet his heart had chosen treason without hesitation. Elena reached for the scrap of parchment tucked in her gown seam. It had been hidden there since the trial, when she feared she would never again have the chance to speak freely. By moonlight, she scrawled words with a piece of charcoal no larger than her thumb. "Forgive me not, for I do not repent. You gave me the only truth I have ever known. If the rope takes me, know that I die yours, not his." She folded the note with trembling hands, tucking it back into the cloak's lining. It was a message she could never deliver, yet leaving it hidden felt like a vow, that somehow, somewhere, Aldric would find it. The hours stretched thin. Outside, the gallows creaked in the wind, each groan a reminder of sunrise. Elena closed her eyes, and in the quiet she remembered the feel of Aldric's hand brushing against hers in the shadows of the great hall. So brief, yet so dangerous. It had been a spark that lit a fire neither of them could extinguish. Footsteps again, this time heavier, slower. A shadow darkened the bars of her cell. "Elena," a voice murmured low, restrained. Her breath ceased. It was him. Sir Aldric stood in the corridor, his face hidden in shadow, his words hushed as though even the stones might betray them. "You should not be here," she whispered, fear and longing tangled in her throat. "I had to see you," he said. Before, his voice broke. He swallowed, then steadied himself. "Do not give them your fear. They do not deserve it." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She nodded once. Silence settled between them, heavy yet comforting. They both knew more words would be dangerous. Still, neither moved away. At last, Aldric straightened, helm back beneath his arm. "The dawn is not yet written," he said quietly, and then he was gone, footsteps fading into the dark. Elena clutched the cloak tighter around her shoulders. The chain still bound her, the gallows still waited, but his words flickered like a torch in her chest. The dawn was not yet written, and for the first time since her sentence, hope pierced the night. The silent escape. The night bled slowly toward dawn. Every moment stretched thin, as if time itself resisted the coming of day. The gallows loomed above the courtyard, its ropes swaying gently in the wind, already whispering of what was to come. Elena lay curled in the corner of her cell, the cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. Sleep never came. Her body trembled between dread and the fragile spark of hope Aldric's words had planted. The air smelled of iron and damp stone. She closed her eyes, listening to the hollow drip of water somewhere in the darkness, each drop counting down the seconds of her life. Above, Sir Aldric moved through the silent corridors with the calm precision of a man accustomed to danger. His armor was gone, replaced with plain black garb that swallowed his frame in shadow. At his side hung only a dagger, silent as breath. He had fought battles with steel and shield, yet this was the greater war. Treason against crown, oath, and name, all for the life of a woman who had undone him with a glance. The guards at the stairwell slumped in their chairs, tankards half empty, lulled into carelessness by the cold hours before dawn. Aldric passed them without sound, his steps measured, his resolve unshaken. He carried no torch. Moonlight through the high slits was enough to guide him. At the dungeon door, he paused, listening. Only silence greeted him. The iron key he had bartered for days earlier slid into the lock. It turned with a soft groan, a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. Elena stirred as the door creaked open. At first, she thought it was a dream, her heart too desperate, her mind too starved for mercy. But then he stepped inside, shadow falling long across the straw, and she knew. "Aldric," she breathed, scarcely daring to speak. He lifted a hand, pressing a finger to his lips. Silence was their ally now. With swift, practiced movements, he unlocked her chains, the iron slipping free from her wrists and ankles. She winced at the raw skin beneath, but did not cry out. When she stood, her knees faltered. He caught her without a word, steadying her with a grip that was both firm and tender. For a moment they lingered, eyes locked, unspoken truths burning between them. Then he gestured toward the open door. They moved like wraiths through the stone passages, her bare feet silent against the cold floor, his steps steady and certain. Every corner held danger, yet every turn brought them closer to freedom. In the courtyard, the gallows loomed larger, silhouetted against the paling horizon. Elena shuddered at the sight, but Aldric guided her gaze away. His horse waited in the shadows of the stable, dark coat glistening faintly under the moon. The beast stamped once, as if sensing the urgency, yet made no sound beyond that. A single guard lingered near the stable gate, his torch sputtering in the wind. Aldric drew his dagger, but Elena gripped his arm, shaking her head. With a subtle gesture, she pointed toward the fallen wine flask at the guard's feet. His chin had sunk to his chest, drunk beyond awareness. Aldric hesitated, then nodded, slipping past with Elena pressed close to his side. At the horse, he lifted her gently into the saddle. The cloak slipped, revealing her pale wrists, but she gathered it around her with shaking hands. Aldric mounted behind her, his arms steadying her against him. The horse shifted, hooves stirring gravel. Elena's heart thundered louder than the sound. Aldric leaned forward, his breath warm against her ear. "Hold," he whispered. Then they were moving. The gate yawned open with a groan, the world beyond veiled in silver mist. The horse's hooves struck the earth in a rhythm that seemed both frantic and ordained. Behind them, the fortress walls shrank, the gallows fading into shadow. Elena dared one glance back. The scaffold stood stark against the lightening sky, ropes swaying like a specter denied its prey. A shiver raced through her. She turned away, pressing herself against Aldric, feeling the steady beat of his heart through his chest. Neither spoke. Words would have broken the fragile magic of the moment. Instead, there was only the rush of wind, the thrum of hooves, the promise of dawn. The eastern horizon began to glow, soft strokes of gold painting the edge of night. Freedom was not yet theirs, pursuit would surely come. But for this moment, she was no longer bound for the gallows. She was alive, carried into the rising day by the man who had chosen her above oath and kingdom. And as the first light broke, Elena realized that dawn was not an end, but a beginning, one written in defiance, danger, and the silent devotion of a knight who had risked everything. Dawn of the Forsaken. The forest embraced them with shadows, branches clawing at cloak and skin as the horse carried them deeper into its hidden paths. Mist coiled between the trees, thick and silver in the newborn light. Elena clutched the reins with trembling hands, her breath ragged, her heart straining as though it could not contain both terror and relief. Behind her, Aldric's arms encircled her, steady and unyielding. She felt the weight of his silence, the choice he had made, the oath he had shattered. He had abandoned his king, his comrades, his very name. All for her. At last he drew the horse to a halt in a clearing where moss blanketed the ground and sunlight pierced in thin, golden beams. Elena slid from the saddle, legs buckling as they met the earth. Aldric dismounted after her, his hand instantly reaching to steady her. For a moment, neither spoke. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. When she finally found her voice, it broke like glass. "You should not have come for me." Aldric searched her face, his expression carved from steel, yet softened by the grief in his eyes. "I could not let you die." Her throat tightened. She turned away, gazing at the slant of light filtering through the branches. "You have doomed yourself. The king will call you traitor. My husband will demand your head. There is no safe path left." "I know," he said simply. The quiet certainty in his tone unraveled her. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting tears. She had thought herself emptied of sorrow, yet here it poured from her like water through broken stone. Aldric stepped closer, his hand brushing her wrist, drawing it gently away from her face. "Elena," he murmured, her name a vow upon his lips. "I swore loyalty to a crown built of cold iron. But my heart swore itself to you long before I ever spoke a word of it aloud." She met his gaze then, and the last of her restraint fell. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest, the thrum of his heartbeat grounding her in a world that had become a storm. His arms enclosed her, not as a knight shielding a lady, but as a man clinging to the one thing that made existence bearable. Yet even in that embrace, the truth remained. Their love was a brand, a fire that marked them as hunted. The forest rustled with distant sounds, wings beating, branches snapping. Elena flinched, drawing closer. Aldric scanned the tree-line, every muscle taut. "They will follow," he said. "Perhaps already." She pulled back just enough to see his face. "Then we are already dead." "No," he answered, voice fierce with conviction. "Not while breath remains. We will find refuge. Somewhere beyond these woods, beyond Selim's reach. The world is wide, Elena. It cannot all belong to kings." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let hope root itself where despair had ruled. Yet her life had taught her the cruelty of power, the relentlessness of men who would rather see a woman hang than admit their pride had been wounded. Still, she nodded. "If the world is wide, then let us claim one corner of it, even if only for a while." He smiled then, faint, weary but real. For the first time since chains had bound her wrists, she felt not condemned, but chosen. They rested only long enough for the horse to drink from a nearby stream. Then Aldric guided Elena back into the saddle, mounting behind her. The forest stretched ahead like an uncharted map, danger pressing from every side. But the dawn was theirs, fragile though it was. As they rode on, the sun climbed higher, scattering the mist, painting the sky in fire and rose. Elena leaned against Aldric, her eyes closing briefly. She knew the hunt would come, that every breath was borrowed from fate. Yet in that moment, with the warmth of his arms around her and the rhythm of the horse beneath, she allowed herself to believe in freedom. The gallows had been denied its victim. The crown had been defied. Love had carved a path where none existed. And though the world would name them forsaken, Elena whispered into the morning air, "We are alive." Aldric tightened his hold, answering not with words, but with silence. Their shared language, more powerful than any vow. The road stretched into the unknown, peril shadowing every step, but the horizon blazed with possibility. And so they rode on, fugitives bound not by rope, but by love unbroken.